There is a certain kind of television moment that you cannot script, cannot rehearse, and cannot undo once the cameras catch it. The kind of moment where the polished surface of celebrity cracks wide open and something raw spills out for the entire country to witness. That is exactly what unfolded one ordinary Tuesday morning in a Manhattan studio, when a former actress turned duchess walked onto the set of a beloved talk show expecting reverence, and walked off 20 minutes later having detonated her own carefully constructed image in front of millions of stunned Americans. Before we move on, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. The host on the other side of that exchange was Kelly Ripa, a woman who had spent the better part of her adult life perfecting the delicate art of making strangers feel like old friends within seconds of sitting down beside her. She had charmed sitting presidents, calmed nervous first-time authors, traded jokes with Oscar winners, and once even coaxed a famously prickly rock star into singing along with the studio band. Her gift was warmth without flattery, curiosity without intrusion, a kind of generous attention that made guests forget the cameras were rolling at all. And in all those years, across thousands of interviews, she had never lost her composure on air. Not once. Until Meghan Markle sat down across from her and decided, apparently, that warmth itself was an insult. Before we walk through what actually happened in that studio, take a second to hit subscribe and tap that like button. Because we cover the celebrity moments nobody else dares to break down honestly, and you are going to want to be here for what comes next week. Now let us step back into that morning and watch the whole thing unfold the way the audience saw it, beat by beat, line by line. The show opened the way it always did, with the live band thumping out an upbeat groove, the audience clapping along, and Kelly and Mark Consuelos shimmying their way down the steps to their chairs with the easy chemistry of two people who had been married long enough to read each other's minds. The first half hour rolled by smoothly. A cheerful pasta demonstration filled the studio with the smell of garlic and basil. A reel of viral animal videos got the crowd howling. Mark teased Kelly about something their middle child had done over the weekend, and Kelly fired back with the kind of perfectly timed eye roll that had launched 1,000 internet memes. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then came the introduction the producers had been hyping all week. Kelly straightened in her chair, her smile widening into something genuinely excited. She told the audience that their next guest needed almost no introduction, that she was a former television actress turned global humanitarian, a duchess, a mother, a founder, a podcaster, and quite possibly one of the most discussed women alive on the planet right now. Then she said the name, and the curtain parted, and out walked Meghan Markle. The applause was loud and generous. Meghan glided across the stage in a cream silk ensemble that whispered money in a way only truly expensive clothing can. Her hair swept back in a low chignon, her smile perfectly calibrated. But anyone watching closely could see that the smile did not quite reach her eyes. She did not walk like a woman happy to be there. She walked like a woman performing the role of a woman happy to be there, every step measured, every angle considered, as though she could feel the lenses tracking her and had decided exactly which version of herself they were allowed to capture. Before we move on, don't forget to hit subscribe button. Kelly stood and pulled her into a warm hug. She told her how thrilled they were to have her. Meghan returned the embrace with the kind of polite stiffness usually reserved for distant acquaintances at funerals, and murmured a thank you that landed about 3 degrees cooler than the moment called for. Kelly's producer instincts, honed across decades of live television, pricked up immediately. Something was off. She filed the feeling away and pressed on, because that was what professionals did. They settled into their chairs. Mark offered his own friendly hello. The audience clapped again. For a brief, fragile moment, everything still felt normal. That moment did not survive the first question. Kelly leaned forward with genuine interest and asked Meghan how she managed to juggle so much: the new projects, the foundation, the podcast, life in Montecito with Harry and the children. It was a softball, the kind of opener every morning show in America uses to put a guest at ease. Meghan tilted her head in a slow, deliberate way, the corner of her mouth lifting in something that hovered uncomfortably between a smile and a smirk. Balance, she explained, was really just a matter of priorities. When you knew what truly mattered, everything else simply fell into place. She had always possessed that clarity. Not everyone, she added with a little pause, was so fortunate. The barb was so soft and silky that an inattentive viewer might have missed it. Kelly did not miss it. Her smile held perfectly, but somewhere behind her eyes a small light flickered. She thanked Meghan for the insight and gently pivoted, suggesting that plenty of working mothers in the audience would love some practical advice on finding that same clarity. Meghan let out a small laugh, the kind that sounds like wind chimes but feels like a closed door. Advice, she said, was tricky because everyone's journey was so different. What worked for someone in her position would not necessarily translate to someone in, well, a different situation. It was not really comparable. Mark, sensing the temperature in the room beginning to slide, jumped in with the practiced rescue instincts of a man who had spent 20 years saving live segments from awkward silences. He pivoted to the foundation, asked her to tell the audience about the work she was most proud of. Meghan straightened a little, and her voice shifted into a register that sounded less like conversation and more like a TED talk delivered to a particularly slow student. The foundation, she said, was doing exactly what it had been designed to do. They were tackling issues that actually mattered, the substantive work that did not always trend on social media, but quietly changed lives. Kelly nodded along and asked the natural follow-up. Could she share a specific program, a particular initiative, something that would let viewers picture the impact? Meghan's eyes narrowed by a fraction of a millimeter, as though the request itself were faintly impertinent. Singling out one project, she said, was like asking a mother to pick a favorite child. Everything they did was important. Everything had impact. Kelly, still smiling, gently noted that she had not meant to imply otherwise, only that audiences tended to connect more deeply when they could attach a face or a story to an organization's mission. Our viewers, Meghan repeated, and the way she emphasized the word "our" turned it into something almost amused, almost mocking, as though she were observing a quaint provincial custom. If they wanted specifics, she suggested, they could visit the website. She had not come on the show to deliver a sales pitch. Kelly blinked. Just once. Anyone who had watched her show long enough knew that single blink meant something. She told Meghan that of course it was not about a pitch, that they just wanted to give her a platform to share what mattered to her. Meghan smoothly cut in. She had platforms. She had Netflix, she had Spotify, she had Archewell. She did not particularly need another one. She was here, she explained, because her team had suggested it would be good exposure for the brand. The word brand thudded into the studio like a dropped microphone. Kelly and Mark did not look at each other, exactly, but something passed between them in the half-second that followed. The silent telepathy of a couple who had hosted live television side by side long enough to communicate entire paragraphs with the smallest shift of a shoulder. Kelly, ever the professional, said warmly that they were grateful to have her either way. And then, because she still believed the interview could be saved, she asked about Harry and the children, mentioned how much America had fallen in love with the family. Meghan's face closed like a door. Her shoulders drew back. She said that they were fine, that Harry was wonderful, that the children were perfect, but that she really preferred not to discuss her family in detail. It was, she added pointedly, one of the things her team had specifically asked the production not to focus on. Kelly nodded. Gracious as always, said of course she respected that, said she had only meant the question in the most general terms. Meghan replied, with a cool little smile, that general terms had a way of turning into specific headlines, and she had learned that the hard way. Anything she said about her children would be twisted, dissected, weaponized. So she preferred to say nothing at all. Kelly agreed, told her that privacy mattered, especially when children were involved. Meghan let a small silence hang, then said, with the kind of casual precision that only practiced people manage, that she was not sure everyone in the media truly understood that concept. The accusation was bare. It was aimed directly at the woman sitting across from her. Mark leaned forward with a disarming grin and tried to puncture the tension. He said that he and Kelly had 3 kids of their own and were every bit as protective of them, that he understood the instinct completely. Meghan turned toward him with an expression that managed in a single tilt of the chin to be both polite and devastating. With respect, she told him, his situation was not quite the same as theirs. His children were not 6th and 7th in line to the British throne. The level of scrutiny was simply not comparable. Mark conceded the point with an easy nod, but anyone who knew him could hear the small steel thread that had just entered his usually playful voice. Kelly tried again to reset the room. She asked about food, about the Los Angeles restaurant scene, whether Meghan had favorites she would recommend. It was the lightest of light questions, a design-to-win softball lobbed gently across the desk. Meghan looked at her as though she had asked her to comment on tax policy in Moldova. She did not, she explained slowly, really think about food in terms of favorites. She thought about nutrition, about sustainability. Kelly's eyebrows lifted by perhaps a quarter inch, she said, in a voice that had grown noticeably quieter, that she actually thought people enjoyed discovering new places to eat, that it was one of life's simple pleasures. Meghan repeated the phrase simple pleasures the way one might repeat the punchline of a joke that had not landed. For some people, she allowed. Perhaps that was enough. For others, there were more important things to focus on. The audience, until now politely engaged, began to shift in their seats. A woman in the 3rd row glanced at her friend with raised eyebrows. Somebody, somewhere in the balcony, let out a single, low, involuntary "oh." Kelly took a breath. 2 decades of professional training were the only thing keeping her face arranged the way she needed it arranged. She said gently that she thought everyone needed simple pleasures sometimes, that life could be intense. Meghan tilted her head and asked, with a faint challenge in her voice, could it really? She found, she said, that intensity was usually a choice. People who felt overwhelmed had usually failed to prioritize properly. They were letting external pressures dictate their internal state. Kelly's smile thinned. She said carefully that she suspected a single parent working 2 jobs or a caregiver looking after a sick relative might disagree that their stress was simply a prioritization issue. Meghan's eyes flashed, the first crack of real annoyance breaking through the porcelain. She had not been talking about people in genuine crisis, she said. She had been speaking generally. Context mattered. Kelly nodded, agreed mildly, said she only wanted to make sure the viewers understood. Meghan cut her off. The viewers, she said, would understand what they wanted to understand. That was how media consumption worked. People heard what confirmed what they already believed. It was not her job to manage their interpretations. And there, in that single sentence, something shifted inside Kelly Ripa. Anyone who had ever watched her interview a guest knew that her entire career had been built on the opposite philosophy, on the belief that the audience was not a passive crowd to be talked down to, but a partner to be respected, included, treated as a friend in the room, to be told, on her own stage, that managing the audience's understanding was beneath the guest she was hosting was not just rude. It was, in a quiet and specific way, a desecration of the thing she had spent her life building. Her face did not change, but something behind it did. She tried one more pivot. England, she said brightly. Meghan had lived there for years. What did she miss most about it? Meghan laughed, sharp and short, with no warmth in it at all. Miss, she said, was an interesting word choice. She did not really miss places. She appreciated experiences and moved forward. Nostalgia was a trap that kept people stuck in the past. Surely, Kelly pressed. There had to be something. The countryside, the history, friends she had made. Meghan said flatly that she had made very few friends there. The system, she explained, did not really encourage genuine connection. Everything was protocol, hierarchy, performance. It was, she added, quite isolating. Although she doubted Americans really understood that, because they all had this fairy tale view of royalty. Kelly tilted her head, she told Meghan, in a voice that had grown noticeably cooler, that she thought Americans were rather more sophisticated than Meghan seemed to give them credit for. That ordinary Americans understood perfectly well that real life was not a fairy tale. Meghan made a small sound, a soft skeptical hum, and said that, from what she had seen, American media still treated royalty like characters in a storybook. The prince, the princess, the castle, very simplistic. Kelly's voice took on the smallest edge, the kind that her longtime viewers would recognize instantly as a warning sign. She said that she thought that was a little unfair, that American journalists had covered the complexities of royal life quite seriously, including the very real challenges that Meghan herself had faced. Meghan repeated the word challenges with deliberate slowness, as though tasting it. The racism, she said. The institutional hostility, the press harassment, those challenges. Kelly said yes, all of those things, and that most Americans had been horrified on her behalf. Meghan looked at her steadily and asked whether they had truly been horrified, or whether they had simply been entertained by the drama, because from where she sat, it was honestly hard to tell the difference. Mark stepped in again, gently, doing the job he had quietly assigned himself in this conversation, which was apparently to keep the wheels from coming all the way off the cart. He said he thought people had genuinely sympathized with what she had been through. The Oprah interview, he said, had opened a lot of American eyes. Meghan turned to him with an expression that suggested she considered his contribution roughly as relevant as a weather report from another hemisphere. The Oprah interview, she informed him, had been necessary. It had been truth-telling. But sympathy was not the same as understanding, and understanding was not the same as change. Nothing, she concluded, had actually changed. The same systems, the same tabloids, the same cruelty. It all continued. Kelly pointed out mildly that Meghan was now in America, that she had built a new life here, that surely that was a kind of change. Meghan replied that yes, a change for her personally, but she had been talking about systemic change, institutional change, the kind of change that actually mattered in the long term. And Kelly, perhaps without quite meaning to, said the line that broke the dam. She said softly that it was admirable to want to challenge institutions. Although some might argue that appearing on a morning talk show was not exactly revolutionary. The words were out before her professional brain could catch them. It was the smallest possible pushback. After 15 straight minutes of absorbing soft little insults and condescending little asides, and a less defensive guest would have laughed it off. Meghan did not laugh. Her head came up sharply. "Excuse me," she said, and the temperature in the studio dropped by 10 degrees. What exactly was Kelly implying? Kelly said quickly that she had not been implying anything. Meghan, ignoring her, said no. She understood. Kelly was suggesting that what Meghan was doing did not matter, that coming on this show had been a waste of her time, that her work was not significant enough to deserve her platform. Kelly said that was not at all what she had said. Meghan said it was what she had implied. Leaning forward now, her posture shifting into something almost combative. "Honestly, Kelly," she said, she had expected more from her. She had thought this would be a supportive environment. Instead, she was being questioned and judged just like everywhere else. "Kelly," whose famous patience had finally, audibly, begun to fray, told Meghan that no one was judging her, that asking questions was what an interview was. Meghan shot back that they were questions with agendas. Questions designed to make her look bad, to catch her saying something that could be taken out of context. Kelly stared at her, genuinely incredulous, and reminded her that the question that had set her off had been about restaurants. Meghan said it was not about any one question. It was the cumulative effect, the tone, the implications. She had been doing this long enough to recognize a hostile interview when she sat inside one. Mark held up both hands like a referee. He suggested calmly that maybe everyone could take a breath. No one, he said, was being hostile. Meghan turned on him with a sudden flash of venom that startled even the audience. Of course he would say that, she snapped. He was Kelly's husband. He was always going to defend her. That was how setups like this worked. Mark, to his enormous credit, did not raise his voice. He simply repeated the word setup with a flat astonishment and reminded Meghan, very quietly, that they were just trying to have a conversation with her. A conversation, Meghan declared, required mutual respect, and she had not felt respected from the moment she had sat down. Kelly looked at her with a kind of bewildered honesty and asked what, specifically, she had done that was disrespectful. She had complimented her work. She had asked about her family in the gentlest possible terms. She had tried to keep things warm. Meghan said it was not always about the words. It was about the energy, the assumptions underneath the questions. Kelly had been treating her like just another celebrity, not like someone genuinely trying to change the world. And there, with that line, Ripa finally stopped performing politeness. She told Meghan evenly that she treated all of her guests with respect and interest, that if that was not enough for her, she genuinely did not know what would be. Meghan said that genuine engagement would be enough, that maybe Kelly could actually ask about the issues that mattered to her, instead of these surface-level questions about restaurants and balance. Kelly reminded her, still calm, that she had asked about the foundation multiple times, and that Meghan had refused every single time to offer a single specific example. Meghan said she should not have to justify her work to her. The work, she said, spoke for itself. Kelly asked, finally, what Meghan wanted to talk about, because she had tried every topic she could think of, and Meghan had shut each one down. Meghan said, perhaps she wanted to discuss why American media was so obsessed with celebrity and so allergic to substance. Perhaps she wanted to address the systemic issues facing women of color in the entertainment industry. Perhaps she wanted to have an actual intellectual conversation instead of all this fluff. The word fluff hung in the studio air like smoke after a gunshot. Ripa had built her entire career, her entire identity, on a show that took warmth seriously, that believed light and smart were not opposites, that respected its audience enough to entertain them without ever talking down to them. To be dismissed as fluff on her own set by a guest whose resume contained considerably fewer accomplishments than her own was the last thing her patience could absorb. She set both hands flat on the desk, looked Meghan directly in the eyes, and her voice, when it came, was not loud. It was something far more dangerous than loud. It was clear. She told Meghan that she had hosted this show for over 20 years, that she had interviewed thousands of people, from Nobel laureates to heads of state to ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things, and that she had treated every single one of them with the same respect and the same curiosity. The fact, she said, that Meghan had chosen to interpret her hospitality as hostility said far more about Meghan than it would ever say about her. The audience drew in a single, collective breath. This was not the Ripa they tuned in for. This was a woman who had been quietly pushed for 15 straight minutes and had finally, calmly, planted her feet. Meghan's face flushed an unmistakable shade of pink. She said she could not believe Kelly was speaking to her this way on live television. Kelly said, evenly, that Meghan had been speaking to her condescendingly on live television for the entire interview, and that she was simply responding in kind. Meghan said she had not been condescending, she had been honest. Kelly said no, she had been rude, and then she had called her rudeness honesty in order to justify it. That, Kelly said, was a very convenient definition of truth. Meghan stood up. Her chair scraped against the polished floor with a sound that made several audience members flinch. She said she did not have to sit there and be insulted. Kelly rose with her, refusing to look up at her from a seated position, and said quietly that Meghan had not been insulted. She had been treated exactly the same way every other guest in that chair had been treated. The only difference, Kelly said, was that Meghan had walked in expecting special treatment and had not received it. Special treatment, Meghan repeated, voice rising. She had expected basic courtesy. Kelly told her she had received basic courtesy. What she had wanted was deference, and Kelly did not defer to people simply because of their titles or because of who they had married. The mention of marriage struck Meghan like a slap. Her eyes flared. She told Kelly not to dare bring Harry into this. Kelly, without raising her voice, pointed out that she had not mentioned Harry once in the entire interview. Meghan, she said, was the one who kept invoking him. Meghan said it was because everything she did was filtered through him, through the royal family, through this exhausting narrative that she was somehow defined by the man she had married. She was her own person. She had a career before Harry. She had accomplishments. Kelly said, gently and truthfully, that she knew that, and that she had been looking forward to talking about exactly those things, but that Meghan had spent the entire interview defending herself against questions Kelly had not even asked. Meghan snatched her clutch from beside the chair, her movements sharp and graceless. Now the elegance burned away by anger. Coming here, she said, had been a mistake. She should have known American media was every bit as toxic as the British press. And Kelly, finally, let the last piece of restraint drop. She told Meghan, plainly, that American media had been overwhelmingly supportive of her. That Oprah had given her 3 uninterrupted hours of friendly airtime. That Ellen had hosted her warmly more than once. That every magazine profile had been a love letter. If that, Kelly said, was toxic support, she would hate to see what Meghan considered toxic criticism. Meghan's voice rose another notch. She said Kelly did not know anything about what she had faced, that she sat there in her comfortable studio, in her comfortable life, asking her comfortable little questions, and thought she understood struggle. She did not. She could not. Kelly said, very simply, that she was right, that she did not know Meghan's specific struggles, but that she had never claimed to. All she had ever done was try to have a conversation. A conversation, she added, that Meghan had made impossible at every single turn. Meghan turned toward the wings. Then, halfway through the step, she spun back, pointed a trembling finger at Kelly, and said that Kelly was going to regret this. That when people saw how she had been treated here, they would see exactly what had happened. Kelly did not flinch. She simply said, in a voice that carried across the now silent studio, that cameras did not lie, that she had asked normal questions, that Meghan had responded with hostility from the very first answer, and that Meghan was leaving now, not because anyone had mistreated her, but because the interview was not unfolding the way she had scripted it in her head. Meghan said the environment was toxic. Kelly said no. Meghan was leaving because she was not in control of the room. And being out of control was something she clearly could not tolerate. The observation landed with such surgical precision that Meghan actually flinched, as though the words had a physical weight. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face that looked less like anger and more like recognition, as though she were briefly seeing herself through Kelly's eyes and did not love what she saw. Then the wall slammed back into place. She said in a tight, icy voice that Kelly would be hearing from her team about how the interview had been conducted. Kelly said calmly, that she looked forward to it, that every minute of footage was available, that everything that had happened in the studio had happened on camera, in front of witnesses, with nothing edited and nothing hidden. Meghan turned and walked off the set without another word. Her heels struck the floor in sharp, angry little reports, each one echoing through the stunned silence of an audience that, for the first time in the show's history, had completely forgotten to applaud. Mark watched her vanish into the wings, then turned slowly to his wife with an expression somewhere between disbelief and protectiveness. He asked her, quietly, if that had really just happened. Kelly sank into her chair, the adrenaline that had been holding her upright beginning to drain out of her hands. She nodded. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, it had." The show cut to commercial. A producer materialized at Kelly's elbow within seconds, asking urgently whether she was okay. Kelly said she was fine, although her voice was quieter than usual, she admitted, with the kind of honesty that had always defined her, that she felt sad, actually. She said she had genuinely wanted to give Meghan a good interview. She admired plenty of what Meghan had tried to do with her life. She just had not been able to sit there and let herself be slowly disrespected on her own stage. Mark slid his arm around her shoulders and told her, simply, that she had not done anything wrong, that she had been more patient than almost anyone he had ever seen. She asked him whether she had been too harsh at the end. He told her she had been honest. There was a difference. Kelly smiled at the echo of Meghan's own line in his mouth and said softly that she supposed there was. When the show returned from the break, Kelly addressed the camera directly. She said, with a small, tired smile, that the audience had just seen something they had not exactly tuned in for, and that she wanted to apologize to everyone watching at home and to the studio audience. That kind of interview, she said, was not what they aimed for on this show. They always wanted guests to feel welcome, even when conversations got a little intense. Then she paused, gathered herself, and added something that her longtime viewers will remember for a long time. What she would not apologize for, she said, was asking questions and expecting real answers. That was her job. It was what she had been doing for more than 2 decades. And her viewers deserved honesty, both from the guests on her stage and from her. Mark nodded beside her, then grinned and promised the next segment would be a lot more fun. The audience laughed gratefully, the tension finally breaking. The rest of the hour unfolded the way mornings on that stage always did. A delightful author with a charming book, a cooking demo that filled the studio with the smell of something sweet, light, warm, smart television. The kind of show America had loved for years. But everyone in that studio, from the camera operators to the people in the front row, knew that they had just witnessed something they would be telling their families about for years. If you like this video, then subscribe.